It has been the greatest rivalry in men's rugby for generations. For, what, 70 odd years that's been the case. Was what we saw on last Saturday the start of it being the same in women's rugby?
That's a great question to kick off with. It could
This
be.
is New Zealand versus South Africa for anyone that's accidentally, like, is also playing from the previous video.
Yes.
That's it.
It could well be. And obviously, we are talking a long time to come because there's a huge gap that would need a bit of making up to do from the Springboks perspective, because the Black Ferns have the hell of a head start on this with 6 World Cups under their belt. However, the fact that the Springboks managed to make them even sweat was monumental. That before the game, I went into it thinking, no matter what happens here, this is a win for the Springboks. Like, this is a successful World Cup campaign because they've made their first ever quarterfinal. And more importantly, right, and this is the thing that, like, Belinda Moore, the Welsh Rugby Union, was trying to make out as the case for Wales, but isn't. Wales being shit, right? In that it has had a genuine, like, meaningful impact off the pitch to the way people view the Springboks as a women's team, women's rugby generally, the people they will have inspired, the kind of splash of that World Cup.
I have read so many stories of people saying that, you know, they have friends who only watch, like, the Springboks when they play the Springbok men when they play the All Blacks in World Cups, who tuned in to watch this game or watch, you know, the last couple of games of Springbok women, or people saying, like, my wife's never really watched rugby, but, like, she's got so into this World Cup.
Yeah.
And I've seen so many stories like that from South Africans of people being like, oh, my mate who, you know, like, never watched the URC but got really into this because it's the national team. And I saw equally people saying, like, I'd never watched women's rugby a few weeks ago. I'm now crying watching this team because I love them so much.
Yeah.
And you can only imagine the welcome home they'll get when they play in South Africa next. And then the growth they've got, you know, opportunities-wise beyond this. Not to get too ahead of ourselves, but, like, really positive that Swiss De Bruyne has already started his contract talks to continue as head coach, which is really good, like, the fact they've jumped straight on that. They've also been very outspoken. One, like, re-sign him up. Two, they're going to try and set up 4 professional teams. And over a league that will have 6 teams in it, 2 semi-professional, 4 fully professional. They can only have 1 in the Bull Daisies, plus, you know, 4 semi-professional teams. So the idea is to build a player pool that will beat any other team in the world, right?
It's scary.
A player pool comparable to England's.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's a part of me that wants to sit back on my heels about this because I'm scared of the potential for growth they have, because like, I want women's rugby to grow in any country in the world, right? But also I'm kind of like, oh no, but South Africa are going to be a serious force and are going to start knocking people over, because as we've said in previous videos, right, looking at the men's team and their under-20s teams they've produced and so on, right, South Africa just seem to have some kind of genetic advantage when it comes to rugby. They have a style of play that suits them, and they, as human beings, you know, there are so many people who are somehow all the things that you need to be in rugby, where you are physically fit as well as big and powerful and strong, right? The human beings that they seem to produce in South Africa, and as I say, this is what national sports is. It's seeing which country produces the best athlete, type of athlete for the sport that you're competing in, the event you're competing in. South Africa are very, very good on genetics in rugby. And we are already learning that that is not just for men.
And I think this is something you can look at the Springbok team already, this women's team, and it's evident, you know, you look through them, right, how many different backgrounds they come from, how, like, diverse a range of stories we have. Like, it's something De Bruyne talked about quite recently. It's the fact, you know, you can go over any number of pieces from Supersport, from, you know, like Elmer, over in, you know, various channels and so on, of, like, how brilliant this range of stories are and how brilliant this group is, right? The Springbok men, over the last sort of 15 years, have finally started tapping into the full potential of that nation and looking beyond the handful of, like, predominantly white, quite, like, you know, well-off areas that their Springboks have come from, with 1 or 2 exceptions always dropped in, you know, here and there. They have, therefore, like, managed to drastically increase their player pool and develop the second most depth to France of any nation in the world, though, you know, it's pretty neck and neck between those two. France have done it through having 30 plus professional clubs. South Africa have 5, 6, you know, plus the Curry Cup being largely professional. But they did it through, like, player pool and through having so many athletes and doing it at lower levels, right? And all they've got to do is give the same opportunities once they get at the top level to women, and go, okay, we've done this previously with people that didn't fit the mould of what we thought a rugby player was 30 years ago, but are still men. what do we expand that out to be women as well?
Yeah.
And it feels like the opportunity is there for South Africa to, inside our lifetime, win a World Cup, right?
Yeah.
And I think of any team that is, outside the kind of like big 4 or 5, they are the one with the highest ceiling.
Oh, 100%
Their ceiling is to win is to be like top 3 in the next few years. Swiss De Bruyne said in the press conference afterwards, it was very open. He said, like, I've been thinking this, haven't been saying it out loud, haven't said it to the players yet, but we're going for top 4 next time.
Yeah, yeah. When you look at like South African schools rugby, like boys rugby, it's mental, isn't it? Like A, the crowds they get in, and B, just like the talent they have in there.
Yeah.
Like honestly, like I feel like if there was, I mean, I know there is like World Schools Championships and go on and stuff like that, but you've got to imagine like on aggregate that they are probably playing the highest level of like schools rugby there is across the world, right? So you can imagine that those pathways, and a lot of this comes down to the Moby units, of course, that Rossi set up via Dwayne Vermeulen.
Yeah.
A lot of that, and we'll talk about that
now
another day,
headed up
sure.
by Dwayne Vermeulen.
Yes,
they
indeed.
predate Dwayne Vermeulen.
Yes, indeed. But yeah, you imagine that that's going to play a big role.
This is the thing, right? Is that it already exists? I think the path in South Africa is to set up a second Moby unit.
Yeah.
That alongside the Dwayne Vermeulen. For people that aren't familiar with it, right? Basically, it is a unit set up by Rassie Erasmus when he first came in as director of rugby. It was actually involved when he was first in, before he was director of rugby, when he was like technical advisor. He set this up, then decided to when he became director of rugby, came in from Munster in 2017. He kind of went like, okay, this is the key critical part of how we make this work. So it's a set of coaches who work with the national team and essentially want to deliver their IP across, initially it was the 4 Super Rugby clubs when he first set it up, but then it went down to like schools teams, to like,
local clubs,
like
junior sides.
Yeah. So they'd have coaches who are of the standard to coach international rugby. Let's say this currently
even like first teams, like locally,
and get them playing to the highest possible level, get them understanding scrummaging to the highest possible level, right? The one thing is, right, if you raise the standard of a first team at amateur level, right, then a 16-year-old comes through and plays for them. They're playing at a better, higher standard, which means that then if they do step up higher, they're more level, more able, they're a better player when they get there.
There's a ripple effect to this.
Exactly.
And, people start coaching and spreading this better rugby knowledge.
Exactly. And so that became a key part of this, right? He then started, a few years ago, just in the lead up to the last World Cup in 2022, moving that to women's rugby. So that Moby unit uses the likes of Don Human, their men's scrum coach, has gone over and coached the women, plus like the likes of Dwayne Vermeulen and so on that are in there at the minute. Wanky Stick's been involved as well of late, with Tony Brown taking a lot of his lunch, have been used to go and coach the women's team and sharing that IP between them, right?
Yeah.
So the Springbok women are being coached in the same way as the Springbok men, despite, and Swiss De Bruyne, obviously a former like Rassie, left-hand man, kind of his like second left hand under Jacques, when he first took over. So like someone that shares that IP and the same ideas anyway. But I love it and I think it's really interesting. But I think what you need is to expand that out so that you can apply the same pressure, the same level of attention to detail that they are with the men's programme, going right down to schools level, to the women. Because at the minute it's only really working the women's Springboks and the Bull Daisies and the odd other semi-pro club.
For anybody who's never watched men's rugby, Rossi Erasmus is a coach. No, anyway. So
there's a book here somewhere.
Yeah. Focusing a little bit on this game and the specifics of it, right? You talk about Swiss De Bruyne there, and again, what a brilliant job he's done with this Springboks team. And it's brilliant, the further this team moves up the ladder, right, the more he's mirroring Rossi, and as in the side of Rossi that's won World Cups, because above all, right, we've said this 1,000 times, Swiss De Bruyne is a really highly renowned attack coach. That he's all about building structures. And what we saw in this game is how much he's held back in terms of innovation.
So there was a really good piece on Rugby Pass, an interview of him the day before the game. I don't know if you read it.
No.
It's really good, really worth reading. Where they get into his whole coaching career. I didn't know his journey. He was a teacher who never really had much of a playing career, but started coaching his local schools team. And they grew from having literally no resources and often turning up 13 players, and they started beating all of the big teams in the region and teams that had big rugby scholarships, big rugby programs, as well as looked like former Springboks coaching them. And he very quickly got snapped up by the Sharks Academy because they went this guy's incredible. Like, look what he's getting out of like literally no like talented players. You know, no disrespect to any of those players are watching. But then kind of rose it through the ranks, right? So he said like, one thing is I love coaching underdogs. You know, he said like I got too used to coaching like the Springboks. You know, he's like,
Sure.
My favourite thing is coaching underdogs and like finding ways for underdogs to win. But he said like his philosophy on the game is that you should never go into any team with an idea of how they're going to play. Right, and that you can only, once you get to know the players individually,
So true.
Know how you're going to coach the team and how they're going to play. And he said, like, basically, every week he spends with the Springboks women, he gets a better idea of his game plan and what it's going to be in like a year's time or another week's time. And his like whole philosophy on the game is that every player you play with, you know, like whether it's like a kid who's going to quit the game in 2 years' time, but is like just there for a laugh, or whether it is whether it's Sia Khaleesi, it's like an all-time great, right? Like every player has a superpower, every player has something they're good at. Build your game plan to make sure all of them are only doing, or as like much as possible, doing that thing, right? So you look at this team, and I think like the really telling thing there is him saying like, every week I spend with these players, I get to know them better. Right? And therefore I know how to coach them better, I know how to build a game plan around them better. And I think we saw that. I think they have got better every year in this tournament. And for the fact they've been in camp together for like, you know, 2 months or whatever now. They haven't been going home, they haven't been playing separately. Like, he spent time with them day in, day out. Like, I imagine time spent in the hotels playing cards or watching, you know, TV, whatever it is, probably contributes as much to that as anything.
Sure, being on tour, you learn a lot about each other.
Exactly. So, you look at the way in which, you look at those 2 initial tries, such a clear, evident system of like, every player knows their roles and are fighting for each other. But we've had this real growth of like the structure out of that idea, and of, instead of it being, you know, this team are playing to a game plan, this team are like evolving and changing and finding ways for them to work, right? So you look at that 15-player line out, which is being the talking point, which has been outstanding. Like I've seen a handful of these, but they always take place like within 5-10 meters of the line.
Yeah,
so running it off halfway is incredible.
Yeah, and as I say, like Swayze is an attack coach first and foremost, right? But what you said there about building around the strengths of the Springbok team, because the Springbok team, to boil them down to one thing, are a power team.
Yes, they are.
They are a strong group, and so Swayze has gone, brilliant, let's just work around that. So twice in this game, they went for 15-player lineouts. And I love this because they go for, we've seen it a couple of times before where people have done this or put backs in lineouts and so on, right? But they really lean into this. So the first time they do it, they lift Briandre Dolph as probably the lightest player in their team. Again, really agile player that can get in the air. And important as well about being light, it means all the heaviest players can then pile in straight afterwards. And so they're split into sort of like 4 different lifting pods here. But that means that that's 4 different units of power that can get straight behind that. And as a Black Ferns team, you're not really sure how to defend that. So they just go with their front 8s to defend it, rather than piling more backs in case they have a pre-play where, you know, Malinga then just like comes around and they cross-field it to, or whatever. You know, there's plenty of variations they could do with this. But instead, they just go straight up the guts. And then the second time they do it, it's great. They lift Nadine Ruiz instead this time as the other lightest player in the team, the scrum half. And again, they can just pile around her and generate momentum.
Yeah. I watched this game with someone that doesn't watch a great deal of rugby. And I asked, well, actually, no, hold on. If you're allowed to do it, why wouldn't you just put all 15 players in all the time? I think
it makes sense.
There's a fair question in that. That this becomes like the really exciting thing is looking at what pieces you have on the board and how can we use them best, right? And is the best way to use Briandre Dolph having a jump at lineouts? No, it's not, right? But that allows you to then use the other 14 players as best possible.
Yes.
Right? And having her as almost a sacrificial lamb of the one player that isn't using her superpower, so the others can.
Or you have to teach us how to transfer a ball in the morning.
Exactly. And you can do that in one session, right? And there's a stat that like always stuck with me, that Toby Booth, the now of Harlequins, congratulations to him, glad he's employed. Who he once brought up the stat, right, that when he was at the Ospreys, their chance of scoring off a maul went up by 50% if they got 2 or more backs in. He then pointed out basically that only counted if Kieran Williams came in. Like if Kieran Williams came in, their chance went up 50%. But he's coming up in every single video we ever make. I'm committed to this. But like, how much, if you can get, if 2 backs going in increases your chance by 50%, if you put all 15 in, how many percent does it get higher?
Yeah.
And the thing is, right, it kept working because it led to penalties.
Yeah.
And this was the one thing that they managed to do really smartly, was win penalties. And their use of then the scrum and the line out And this scrum is such a weapon, man. Like
Yeah.
that scrum's ability to eke out penalties and work as a launch pad, the way in which Hele will sometimes just blast off it and not wait for the penalty, I really, really like as well. The fact that sometimes she just won't hang around.
Importantly as well, another innovation of Swayze, which I've never seen done before on a rugby pitch, and that's why having like some of the kind of top end genius coaches that have been are renowned as that in the men's game, bringing them over to the women's game, and like this is top end international rugby in the World Cup. Like of course we should be using these coaches like this. It's super important, and I love this. The first scrum of the game, their use of Hele. And they get her to just peel off onto the left-hand side, and they get Nadine Ruiz to just bind on and start a maul. Now, I've done a bit of digging into this. So, in the World Rugby Law Book, a maul is defined as a phase of play consisting of a ball carrier, and, so not including the ball carrier, and at least one player with each team bound on and on their feet. So at this point, Hele is the ball carrier, and Nadine Ruiz and Maya Joseph are the one player from each team who are bound in. Now, Solonsi at blindside flanker also gets up and engages, because this is a pre-call, they know they're doing this. Which then means as well, on top of that, both second rows and other flanker can get to their feet, then front row can get to their feet and engage in all of this. By which point, New Zealand maybe have 2, at most 3 players in this maul. Setting this off a scrum is genius as well, because obviously you're relying on, you can, as the team with the ball on the front foot, you can decide how long you keep the ball in play for. That's one of the biggest advantages of the scrum. You can decide how long this is a scrum for, right? And so you can decide how much energy you're putting into this. So they usually, South Africa, like to drive in scrums. But on this case, instead, they just go for route one ball, get it straight to the back, so they keep all their energy. New Zealand are dying at this point because they've just pushed. They have to get up to their feet, get back on side and push again. Whereas South Africa have concentrated all this energy into this maul straight off the back of a scrum that's a preset.
This is Swayze looking at his old mucker Razzies line out off a line out thing and going, actually I've got a better idea.
Yeah.
And this is a better idea. This is better.
Also bringing in Nguevu from the back line as well to just propel it forward.
So
Katshula as well from 7.
This is ingenious, and I think we'll see more of it.
Yeah, I agree. It scares me what Rossi's going to do with this.
Yeah. The use of Hele coming off that scrum, right? And at most, right, you're looking at, obviously she can engage contact on and dictate the terms of it with Joseph.
Yeah.
Possibly you can get one of the 2 flankers or the number 8 to burst off and get it to ground immediately, right? That's the only way you can really stop this. Kind of in the same way
you have to know it's coming in a way.
You have to do it as like a sack.
Yeah.
Like a sack at the line out, or like immediately to ground, bam, before 2 players commit on. You just make it a double tackle rather than you don't allow Ruiz or whoever else is be playing 9 or whoever's closest in the situation, right? Whether it is another flanker or something to lock in. That is your one chance to stop this.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, right, it becomes a reverse scrum.
Yeah.
And if you can get the situation right, and the problem is, most times it will end up having to be the scrum half coming in on the problem, is the thing.
That's what I would. The one thing I would change about this going forward is I would get Nguevu to put into the scrum instead.
That's
the
a
biggest
good
player.
idea. That's a good idea.
And get Ruiz to play 10.
Can we email swace@saru.com?
Yeah.
And say next time.
The Springbok men could do this with like Damian de Allende or Andrea Esterhazen putting the ball into the scrum.
They've had Justin
It'd be
Colbe put into the
monstrous.
scrum before.
Exactly. Yeah, and it turned him into the best player in the world all of a sudden.
Yeah.
But straight from this, so they get penalty advantage, obviously.
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? It's like you're automatically getting penalty advantage.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you the opportunity.
It's not a protocol of how to defend this. It's never happened before.
The other thing about this, right, that I want to point out, when we talked about Razzie doing the move before, right?
Yeah.
The problem when you chuck up to the line out and you go round, right, is exactly what Tupovai did a few weeks later, is he then wraps around and hits at the tail, and because the offside line, right, is like here, you lift the ball, there's no offside line, you can go round, right? From the scrum, the offside line is 10 metres behind the scrum.
And even for the scrum half, under the new laws, it's at the tunnel.
Yeah.
So they can't advance on the 8.
Exactly. So you've got at most one player who can advance. The others can't do it. They've got to run 15 metres probably to get there in time.
Yeah.
So that's out of the picture once you consider the angle. So you've got one player that can engage. If you get your number 8, who will be like 12 times out of 10 bigger than the scrum half, if they can dictate the terms of the contact, then that takes out the risk of someone wrapping around there no longer being an offside line.
Yeah.
The one thing is, like, once the maul is created, does a maul count as an offside line, actually, I'm thinking?
Yeah, on the back foot,
Yeah, pretty sure, yeah.
It's just shifted, so it's a weird one,
So the offside line changes. It does, I suppose it means the backs come quicker.
Yeah.
But still, like, you are able to use that offside line to your advantage, the 10 metres back, or 5 metres on the... Like, on the try lines where I want to see this run.
Yeah.
Like, 5 metres out.
100%.
Like,
well, they go to the corner from this, and South Africa opt for, and this is another crazy play of Sway's. They go, we mentioned a 15-woman lineup, or it would have been like a 12, whatever, player lineup.
12-player lineup, 15 going to the maul.
Yeah, yeah. But this time they opt for a 2-woman line-out.
Yeah.
Completely the opposite. So Lochner here at 5 for the Springboks is the one jumper here. She gets up and they have the whole pack just stood in the 10 channel, like opposite. And obviously New Zealand mirror that. They go for the same. It would be so funny if they just went, yeah, Rua, hey, good luck. Yeah. Let's take them all.
But it does, like, there's a little bit of... Oh, I didn't think of that.
Yeah, yeah.
From the brain.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, we're going to put our entire pack opposite.
Just in case they just leave their 9 and 10 in that channel. It would look genius if they do.
But it's probably like, you know when you make a move in chess and you've just opened yourself up to have your queen taken?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Oh, I thought I just won it, never mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's got a little bit of that of being like, oh shit, yeah, okay.
It's also really funny because you look at it and you're like, I wonder what they're going to do here.
Yeah.
You know? And then obviously Ruiz hits the pod in midfield and Kaipo Olsen-Baker does a brilliant job on this and goes straight for the clean
Sack.
chop tackle.
Sack.
Yeah. For like, as you say, like an open play sack going for, like, it's incredible, like just general game awareness to go for this and to stop this happening in the first place. And then you mentioned as like, and this will be the last one of the big innovations of running this 5 metres out, the scrum to maul play. And this is exactly what they do in the lead up to the try scored by Balwa Latcha.
Yeah, so the thing is the Black Ferns have seen it once, right?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of like, you can imagine the sheer panic taking place in a huddle. And thankfully for the Black Ferns, they get like 2 or 3 stoppages that are quite long stoppages in between to talk about and go like, what just happened? So I think they're aware of it. And I think
they stop it at source, I'd say, but it's kind of the after effect of having to then defend that pack when you're on the back foot that they struggled with.
The tricky thing is the Springboks do go for a shove at the scrum.
Yeah.
They keep the ball in. And it's a different approach. The first one, they just go in that channel 1 ball, let's get this moving.
Yeah.
This time, they go for a penalty advantage, which I don't think is a bad call. I think.
I agree.
You know,
when you're close to the line, you want that.
Exactly. You want that, like, mercy to play with, right? And also, if you are bringing the ball into a maul, you are risking getting turned over.
Yeah.
You know, you're kind of like initiating a choke tackle potentially, as well as risking being held up. So I get it. However, it leads to 2 things, right? One is the ball is slower and it gives the Black Ferns longer to set. 2 is the forwards are just tired now, right? Like, you can't get up from pushing and then instantly go into pushing in a different shape with the same ferocity.
And then into pick and goes as well. That you look at on the sequence of pick and goes, they're constantly going left, right, looking to target Olsen-Baker and get her to carry on making tackles. And it's quite smart the way they target perhaps the most dominant player in contact
on the ground,
in that Black Ferns
right?
team. 100%. And like tire her out. If she's only tackling at 70%, you know, then you're taking away their biggest weapon on a pick and go.
Yeah. I don't care who you are. If you just made 5 tackles in a row, you are getting off the ground for number 6 slower.
Yes, you are.
You know,
yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter who you are.
Even if you're Kaipo Olsen-Baker, like, that's going to happen.
Exactly.
And so Babalwa Latcha, being an extremely powerful prop, drives over.
Yeah.
And
really will take. So she has a moment where she quite daftly reaches out when the ball is not there, the line is not at her mercy earlier, adjusts really well to represent. We talk about a lot on this channel about detail and about like little blocks and so on. They don't do that. It's all body position here. It's body position of the carries. It's them getting incredibly low and getting like into like driving at legs and driving below. There is a bit of concern here, right? And you did the preview for New Zealand Canada, whilst I was off having a breakdown for other reasons, that will become clear in a month or so's time.
Still rugby related.
Still rugby related, but people will see that down the line. The stupid deadline that was set during a World Cup, but that's fine. The stupid timing for the deadline. The deadline itself wasn't, has no concept of intelligence. But there is one thing I'd point out here, right? Which is the first few phases were around the 5 metre line. Not great for the Black Ferns.
No.
So they are quite passive. Their backs are filling in. Their forwards are still set wide. And it allows the Springboks to get up to the line way too easily. That you want to be getting forwards into position sooner rather than letting the likes of, your kind of like your backs be the ones filling in here. And it allows for a lot of really soft, easy carries where instead of making 2 inches, the Boks are able to make a 4 metre.
Yeah.
And I think that's a concern. And look, the Boks are such a forward-oriented team here that obviously they have more to the game, but like within here they're doing nothing but pick and goes. Right?
They lean around that.
Yeah.
There's no secret.
So they're going to go for that 1 metre.
Of course they are.
What are Canada going to do?
Yeah.
Now, we'll have the answer within hours of this video going on.
Yes.
But I can't help but ask the question, what would Canada do? Canada would throw an offload. France would throw an offload.
Yeah.
The Red Roses would like shit their pants and run away because they don't want it. But like that's the question mark there is like, oh, this is the one thing when I look at this performance where I go like, actually that's a bit of an issue for the Black Ferns. Because I think generally that Springbok performance was just like one team being unbelievable.
Yeah.
And they were able to dominate territory and possession. There's maybe more penalties conceded than the Black Ferns would like. But broadly,
Yes, you just say that again.
I don't think this is, I don't think this is like a problematic Black Ferns performance.
No. When it went in 10-all at half-time, which was incredible, and I think we've covered quite comprehensively how they got to that scoreline, right? But I think we could all tell, as long as the Black Ferns don't panic in the second half, they'll be all right. Because they did panic in the first half and gave away stupid penalties and surrendered the ball in silly situations.
At no point did I think South Africa were going to win this game.
No, I didn't either.
Maybe that's unfair of me, but it was just like every minute longer they can keep this up is incredible.
Yes. Which, that, as I say, that is the win in itself, isn't it? But then the Black Ferns' performance in the second half, it was calmness personified, wasn't it? I talked in that preview that I did about just the sheer instinct that they have, like that they are a better team at just like passing the ball, drawing people in and passing the ball wide than I've basically. They were really relying with the 2015 All Blacks.
Yes, that's
in
it,
that.
isn't it? That's the comparison.
Yeah.
In terms of their just raw like handling of the ball, which is the really outstanding skill of them all.
Yeah.
And a lot of those tries were not flashy gameplay bollocks. You know, they weren't like we've got an advanced system. It was we've got really talented individuals.
Yeah.
We've got players who can rip you open. And finally, you know, like what, 1, maybe 2 minutes into the second half, they got an opportunity down deep in the bulk half.
Yeah.
And the ease with which they executed it, because every player knew how to hit their lines. A lot of it's dummy lines as well, like they're really unselfish, consistently across the park. Like there is no one in this entire squad, never mind just the 23 on the day, who I think has a knack of running selfish lines or has a knack of like, well, the closest thing is Georgia Miller, and she can afford to because she's that good.
Yeah.
You know? There's no one who is like picking selfish angles or running a line where like they are the only person who can score the try. They're always thinking of the team first, of just like, they're almost, and it's a very like touch rugby thing, right? Of we have an objective, which is to collectively between the 15 of us, find the best way to get this item down to that place.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, it's a team logistics challenge rather than I want to score the glorious winning try myself, right? Like I want the glory. It's no, we've got a challenge that we need to accomplish. And they do that through a bunch of really ridiculously skillful bullshit.
Yeah.
But it still feels a little bit like they're thinking about the game in more holistic terms.
Yeah, that second Sorensen McGee try where
Yeah.
Woodman Wycliffe has to run down the wing and they again use Georgia Miller in that kind of extra centre role. And again, like it's a very unselfish pass to then put Sorensen McGee in there. I think, to be honest, there's two things that from a New Zealand perspective you look at and think are really satisfying. One of them is how good Maya Joseph was at 9. Now, for tonight's game, as it is, as we put this out, she's on the bench.
Yeah.
But she came in and she was just utterly brilliant in her decision-making and everything. I think this is such an underused kind of tactic off penalties, where she takes the quick tap and then puts the kick in behind. Because immediately, by the quick tap coming in, South Africa go, oh shit, they're going to run the ball. And so her putting the little kick in behind is brilliant, because as Malinga tracks back to take the ball, she has both Bremner and Georgia Miller in her face. So she has to then pass it in field for Brandre Dolph, who wants to kind of whack it downfield, but not an option because she's just got so many players in her face. They get the scrum 5, they go to the blindside move, and just again, pure instinct in terms of like the options they take off this. And they score on the edge via Braxton Sorensen McGee.
What an unusual thing for them to do.
Yeah.
The Black Ferns scoring on the edge through Braxton Sorensen McGee.
Yeah.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah.
I've never heard the like.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is really satisfying, we've already mentioned a bit of how good she was, but the return from injury of Kaisa Walton Baker at number 8. Yeah. And we know how insanely stacked they are in the back row.
It was, look, there was talk, and I was one of them before this game, when people were saying like, oh, Walton Baker's back. She's made it. She's recovered from injury in time for the knockout. And I was like, they don't need her. Like,
yeah,
she's a great option to have, but like, they're okay. They're okay. She comes in and is like, you prick.
Yeah.
And
she's world class.
She was the best player on the pitch.
Yeah,
right?
she was.
And undoubtedly player of the match, was given player of the match. Just excellent, even when the Springboks were on top. You talk about them having to target her, right? Because she is so dominant in the tackle beyond what she can do with the ball in hand, which is both in terms of like angle she selects, in terms of
she's slippery, breaking tackles as well, isn't she?
That was exactly what I was about to bring up. Like that ability to wriggle out tackles somehow, almost not notice they were even happening there. To just kind of be like, she probably watched the tape back and be like, oh, 4 people like attempted to tackle me there. I thought it was just like maybe the one at most.
Yeah. She plays like an extra centre, which means as well when you've got Liana Mikaeli-Tu'u playing 6, you've essentially got the actual number 8 there. Like there's so much you can do with that back row. And as I say, like Georgia Miller plays like every position at once in a way, not in a Sophie de Goody way. No, she plays it as every outside back and every loose forward at once. Let's say
she plays like every Justin Tipuric at once.
Yeah. And then you've got Kennedy Tukuvafu as well, who's like an actual 7 whose noses to the floor. Like again, the options they have in that back row are stacked.
It's crazy how Kennedy Tukuyafu, and maybe it's a change of name, I don't know, but since the last World Cup, where she was sort of this like very hard-working but quite dynamic and skillful player. Because Georgia Miller's come along, we now just view her as though she's Sam Warburton rather than who's like not interested in doing anything with the ball.
Yeah, I get the impression that she grew up idolising Richie. Like that's the impression I get from her.
Yeah, you get that.
But yeah, as you say, like the older she gets, maybe it's just that she just wants to be Richie McCaw now that she's the Black Ferns captain. Not Reese. Sorry.
No, Richie Reese. Yeah.
Okay. Anything more we want to add on the Black Ferns whilst we're here? Because you weren't here for the previous video.
No.
Any opinions you might have on them?
Well, look, I think it was a very good performance. I think it was very typical of Warriors. They were extremely solid. This was the Black Ferns in like 5th gear.
Yes.
Right? This is them coasting through. They've put in their state performance against Ireland last week. They know the big ones coming against Canada. They know that if they put out the strongest team, they will beat South Africa kind of no matter like what level of performance they put in and what level of performance South Africa put in.
Yeah.
So I kind of don't think you read too much into it. However, there are individual moments in there where I go, well, they could be doing better here. Yeah. The discipline will be better tonight, you'd imagine.
Yeah, it's exactly what Alan Bunting would have been telling him.
Yeah, exactly. Few moments of defence, few moments of like needing more aggression in defence, I think, more than anything else. But very small work-ons for a team who looked like they were kind of conserving energy for a quarter-final.
Yeah, 100%. So, okay, this is the Black Ferns done with. One more thing I want to talk about the Springboks is that was the final game of Noluthandisa Boy, their captain. And crazy stat. So she, playing at 40 years old, older than Diego Wamachea, the oldest player to play at a men's World Cup.
40 years and 26 days.
Yeah, she's 40 years and something, and a few more than that.
27.
Yeah, yes. So she has been playing international rugby for 15 years. And to go out on the top of your game as the captain of your country at their best ever finish at a World Cup is incredible. Nobody can say that they've done that. Like, usually it's like someone's phoning it in kind of thing.
Apart from Diego Wamachea.
Yes, that is very true.
With one exception. But who was 1999.
Yes, exactly. And not playing in a quarter-final, you know. Whereas
he pulled off his country's first ever World Cup win in those last games.
So. That is true. And that's pretty damn huge.
Not bad.
And what a player he was. Yeah.
So
what a player. But yeah, Noluthandisa Boy did manage that. She said she will never touch a rugby ball again.
She never wanted to touch a rugby ball again.
Fair play to you. You've earned it. Put your feet up and don't think about rugby ever again. You've had a hell of an innings. So when she won her first cap, Braxton Sorensen McGee was 3 years old.
Wow.
So that's
Diego Wamachea was 60.
As far as I can tell, that is the biggest age gap that there's ever been in a Rugby World Cup between two players on the same pitch, which is 22 years.
That is crazy.
So that's 4 years older than Braxton Sorensen McGee is. The age gap between that.
And like that's the thing about Boy as well. She didn't start particularly young. She came through.
She got her first cap at 25.
Yeah,
but that's late for the player she is, kind of thing. Like, I don't know, it's mental.
But then the career she's managed to have through fighting and the perseverance, and there are quite a number of players she played alongside from that era when she first won her first caps, right? Back in like 2010 when she won her first cap, right? Her first World Cup she went to. Yeah. There's quite a few of the Springbok players who could be playing now, who may have continued, not to this World Cup, but certainly the last one, who didn't because the amount of obstacles thrown in their way. Yeah. And I think fair enough that she takes that time off. Because she has been critical. It's taken players like her who are exceptional and it shouldn't have had to be the case, but willing to fight for the jersey and willing to fight for Springbok women's rugby to be put on the same pedestal as the men's one day to kind of dream that dream and live that life and fight for it that has led us to the situation now where we are seriously talking about the Springbok women having 4 professional teams and looking at being potential, chasing a World Cup semi-final and final in a tournament that will be selling 80,000 tickets for individual games.
100%.
Right? Like, it was players like her, and some of them we won't know the names of, some of them, I'm sure she could fill us in on, who fought for this, who got us into the situation, that this doesn't happen without players like her.
100%. Everything you hear about her is how, apparently she's quite shy, but incredibly humble. And as you say, like a sheer trailblazer.
Yeah.
And I suppose what we'll leave this with is Swayze de Brain being Swayze and being like the character that he is. In his post-match interview, in the press conference, said, in 4 years' time, we're coming back to win it.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do. And
Okay.
I love that confidence / arrogance.
We have finished most of these with percentage games, right? I want to run a slightly different one.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the Black Ferns in the 25 World Cup, right? What odds would you put on South Africa to win a World Cup, a Women's Rugby World Cup, within the next 20 years?
Within the next 20 years, very, very good. Within the next 20 years, I reckon 30%.
30%?
Maybe even higher.
I was thinking
don't
like
know.
10%.
Yeah, but again, I don't know, the area for growth here is insane.
Yeah.
I just feel like we can't predict this as we are at
Right,
the moment,
but-
how far they could go.
The thing is, every World Cup has gone to England or New Zealand since 1991.
Yeah.
So that will be broken at some stage
Next
over our
week.
lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Canada
Yeah.
win it. And they hand the trophy over to Flaky George. And he goes, pranked, it was Wales all along. But I don't know, man. I've just got a feeling. I think it's growing. I think it's currently standing at 10%, but I think there's a good chance by the next World Cup we're going, that was conservative.
Yeah. As you said in the previous video, Dinham, they don't call him De Brain for nothing.
Because fuck the English. Anyway,